July 2025, two Israeli soldiers were dancing at a music festival in Belgium. Hours later, they were in handcuffs, being questioned by federal police on war crime charges. It was the first time in 77 years that any European nation had arrested Israeli soldiers for crimes against Palestinians. The organization behind that arrest, the Hind Rajab Foundation, named after a 6-year-old Palestinian girl whose desperate cries for help were heard around the world, but who nobody could save. Welcome to the Enlightenment Podcast to our listeners and viewers from around the world. We appreciate you joining us as we dive into meaningful dialogue about Palestine, offering a context and an insight that is so often missing from mainstream legacy media, while also celebrating Palestine's rich traditions and culture and heritage. Today, we're excited to be joined by Dyab Abou Jahjah, a Lebanese-Belgian activist, writer, and the co-founder of the Hind Rajab Foundation, the organization that is rewriting the rules on accountability for war crimes in Palestine. Dyab has spent 3 decades fighting for Palestinian rights, from the streets of Antwerp to the halls of the International Criminal Court, the ICJ. The Hind Rajab Foundation's work represents the most significant legal challenge to Israeli impunity in generations. Hanan, how did Dyab come to our attention?
So we've been following and supporting the Hind Rajab Foundation in a small way since last year, Shamim, when you and I found out about their incredible work, which is really needed more than ever. And also Dyab Ali kindly introduced us to Dyab, and he's a human rights lawyer and does a lot of work for Palestine. Ahlan and welcome, Dyab. And we're very excited to have you on our podcast. So let's start. Your journey started in the south of Lebanon in Hanin village. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, under Israeli bombs. So if you could please take us back to your childhood in South Lebanon, your earliest memories of the Israeli violence, and at what point did you realize that this is not just your family's story, but it's part of something much bigger that would really go on to define your life's work?
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me. Well, yeah, I was born in South Lebanon in 1971, and indeed a village called Hanin on the Palestinian borders. I think if you stood on our balcony when that balcony was still there, because our home now is destroyed. They bombed it with the last attack on Lebanon, during the war, the recent war. So, but I mean, when that balcony was standing, you could see Palestine from the balcony. It's something that, Palestine is so near to Hanin. It's both geographically, but also culturally and, on the emotional level as well. Many of our people in South Lebanon were working in Palestine. The city for us has always been Haifa, Jaffa. My father was born in Haifa in 1947 because my grandfather was working in Haifa, like many southern Lebanese were working in Haifa. And they were living there. So probably if there were no Nakba, they would have remained there. Our family left Palestine together with the Nakba, together with the Palestinians who were expelled in 1948. My father was 1 year old, and he always told me that story. So no wonder then in the collective mind, I think, of our region, there has always been a link to Palestine, and after the Nakba, to the struggle of Palestine and the Palestinian people. So, my first memories in South Lebanon regarding Israel as a presence is like once I was sitting, I remember that very clearly. It's one of these vivid memories that you can have. I was sitting with my mother on the porch of our home. I remember we had a fig tree. That fig tree was replanted when we came back to our village. But anyway, I remember my mother was feeding me with a spoon, giving me something, and I must have been 2 or 3, probably 3. And then all of a sudden there were helicopters, and my mother told me, "Oh, we have to get in." And I said, like, "Why?" And then she said, "Well, because Israeli helicopters." And I remember that word, And of course, memories are mixed with tales, are mixed with narratives that your parents tell you as a child. So, but I think that I can tell the difference between what is a vivid memory and what is a constructed mix of memory and tale, because I remember that very vividly. Uh, the next memories I have is when they attacked our village in 1976. I was, barely, I think I wasn't five yet. I was almost five, because I'm born in June, so it was in April 1976. And uh, what happened that day is also some of the most vivid memories I keep of my youth. Uh, they attacked our village after a siege of 52 days. And during that attack, I remember people being shot. I remember our home burning. I remember us hiding in a small cave during the night to escape bombs. I remember them killing people. And when I say them, let me be specific. What happened is Israel sent its proxy militias into the village, but it was present. Its tanks were surrounding. Hebrew was everywhere, but like the Germans did also in Ukraine, they let their proxies do the dirty work while they oversee it. And so these were collaborators, Lebanese collaborators, unfortunately, who were working with the Israelis and armed by the Israelis and sent to kill other Lebanese. So this is a very vivid memory, and we were then ethnically cleansed in 76 from our village, and I never saw my village until 2000, the year 2000 when it was liberated. And then we went back to the village and we rebuilt. Everyone came back and rebuilt their home on the same spot where it was, because the whole village was razed totally. So we rebuilt our home and we replanted the fig tree. And again, last summer, that home was again razed to the ground by Israeli bombing. Nothing remains now of it. Maybe the fig tree. So yeah, it's difficult to say what was the first thing, but um, to us and to me personally, but I think to everyone in our region, when you say Israeli occupation, Israeli aggression, you're not talking about theories, you're not talking about narrative, you're not talking about ideology. You're talking about a lived experience, and we know what it is. And this is why myself, but also many people in our region, grow up with empathy that is organic to the Palestinian cause. And not only because our Palestinian are our kin, of course, also that, but this can be said of any other Arab people. Palestinians are our kin. Uh, but it's because we lived through occupation and ethnic cleansing and destruction, not on the same scale, not as hard as what happens in Palestine, certainly not compared to what they unleashed on Gaza in the last two years. But we understand what the nature is of Israeli occupation and Israeli violence.
Yeah. In many ways, Dyab, I think you've answered my next question, but as a novelist and a filmmaker, storytelling and those moments that change things quite drastically for people are always important for me to understand. As a Lebanese who've been fighting for Palestinian rights for the past 30 years, I think there's many ways that you've explained the effect on you of Israel's attacks on Lebanon and Palestine. But were there any particular moments that, as you progressed, as you grew up, as you started to pursue a career or your studies, that really led you down this path of advocacy and change?
Oh, well, a very good question. It's very difficult to find the boundary or the right moment of commitment. I mean, I am committed to this kind of struggle for liberation for as long as I can remember. However, I must, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the invasion of Lebanon in 1982 was a very important moment. I remember I was almost 12 years old. I think, no, I was 11 years old. And I remember Israeli tanks arriving. I remember, having conversations with a lot of people. My father was politically active and very involved and invested in the Palestinian cause. This is something that we have inherited as a family, also from our grandfather, who was in the 30s already, smuggling arms to the Palestinian resistance during the revolt of 36. And so our house was always committed to the struggle of Palestine for many reasons, ideological, but especially, like I said, this reality that was common. But for me personally, I was, of course, a child like all children. I went to school. I was more focused on playing, on doing sports. But 1982, again, forced a whole generation of Lebanese people to go out of the normality, the triviality of everydayness. When you have the tanks, the Israeli tanks in front of your door, when you are under occupation, you live under occupation, you start to think about what to do against it. And I remember that was, even I was so young, that was a conversation that I was picking up from the adults around me, from how my father was talking to his friends. I remember one conversation that's also like very vivid as a memory. My father talking to a guy, and that guy was saying, "Look, I am a defeated person. I'm a defeated human being. I mean, look at them. The tanks are here. We are defeated." And I remember that and this idea, remained in my mind. I remember conversation with Israeli soldiers. I remember talking with Israeli soldiers. I mean, at 11, 12, I was like a nerd, right, reading a lot of books, writing poetry. So, and I was interested in talking. And the Israeli soldiers in the first months were conversing with us children and trying to act very normal with us. That changed after a few months when resistance started. That totally changed. But in the first months, they were trying to sell a narrative that they are coming to liberate us, Lebanese, from the Palestinians. This is the narrative that they were trying to sell. And I remember me debating with two Israeli soldiers about Palestine itself and telling them, well, this is not your land. You're coming from Europe. This is not your land. You stole the land from the Palestinians. And I remember them using religious arguments with me, saying, oh, you go look in the Quran, you read in the Quran, and you will find that we always been there. We are like the people who was right on it. And I told them, and that shocked them. And I told them, well, it doesn't matter for me what do you find in religious books. This is not how I look at reality. I read history books. So I remember them being shocked by this answer. So I think the political awareness, if you can call it that, it started then. It started with the Israeli occupation in 1982, and it grew through the years after. I lived under occupation for 5 years. Uh, I will spare you the details, but I think you can all imagine what it means to live under occupation. And I think that shaped my political commitment to the Palestinian liberation struggle, because that's the mother cause. If we were under occupation in Lebanon, it's all because of the settler colonial projects in Palestine. I mean, this is where everything started. It marked all our lives. It decided that settler colonial project in Palestine decided how are we going to live, not just in Palestine, of course, the biggest effect was on the Palestinians, but also for the Lebanese. The civil war was connected directly to the settler colonial project in Palestine, and so on. So at that moment, you understand, oh, this is something that need to be countered. That this is something we need to resist against.
No, absolutely. And actually, you mentioned the 36. My cousin Anne-Marie Jasser, her film Palestine 36, which has been shortlisted for the Oscar. We did the podcast with her, and she covers that period in the film. A must watch for those who haven't seen it. But yeah, you were talking about resistance, and I believe you said that resistance groups are consequences and not causes. And you said, I quote, "We grew up under Israeli bombs. Hezbollah didn't exist. Hamas didn't exist. Israel is the problem." and resistant groups are consequences. So can you talk about this? And also, if you can talk about the case you brought against Ariel Sharon for the Sabra and Shatila massacres, and if you can tell the audience, not everyone knows about Sabra and Shatila.
Yes, of course. I mean, the word resistance tells it already. You resist against something. It's a reaction. It's not an action. It's not something you do out of the void. You are forced to resist. It's like somebody is trying to bury you under a stone and you push. And this is resistance. It's not resistance per definition is never aggression. You don't aggress by resisting. And I think this is beyond just rhetoric or linguistic discussion. I think even on the legal level, international law has recognized early on the fact that people under occupation, any people under occupation, has the right to resist that occupation. International law even uses a terminology that's quite radical. It says by all means available, not just by any means necessary, which is considered very radical, in reference to Malcolm X. And some people consider, once I've written on a post, free Palestine by any means necessary. And I remember I was a columnist at a newspaper here in Belgium, and they fired me based on that. I refused to retract it. And then I remember, and I said, look, this is very moderate by saying by any means necessary. It's very moderate, because if it's not necessary, don't use it. While international law uses by all means available. So it doesn't have to be necessary even. You can use all means available to you to resist occupation. So it is a clear legal and moral and ethical prerogative for any occupied population across the planet. The funny thing is, unfortunately, we live in a world that resistance as a right is recognized and celebrated for certain populations, and it's totally criminalized and problematized for others. Okay, let's look at Ukraine, for example. How the European narrative, the narrative in Europe, well, if you analyze the European narrative on Ukraine after Russian invasion, it's glorifying resistance without even looking at ideology, without even looking at the flags that the resistance fighters are carrying. And when you, for example, to give an example, the Azov Brigade, which is part of the Ukrainian army, it's a paramilitary group, is a neo-Nazi group. And nobody contests that. It is a neo-Nazi group. It celebrates Hitler. It celebrates, extermination of Jews. It's a neo-Nazi group. Well, it is celebrated in the West as part of the resistance. And when you tell them, well, their ideology is rather shocking. These people are this and that. They tell you, yeah, but it doesn't matter now because there's occupation now. Now all hands on deck. So when we apply the same logic for groups in occupied Palestine or even in occupied Lebanon before, because it's still occupied Lebanon actually now, they will not allow this logic. They cannot tell you. They will come to a debate on ideology. And then there's all of a sudden this scrutiny on ideology and symbols and flags, which is totally hypocritical. Last example on that, which is very telling as well. On the 14th of July, 14 Juillet in French, which is the national day of France. Every year they have a military parade, and then you have the president of the republic, the prime minister, and the dignitaries standing there, and they, of course, play the national anthem, which is the La Marseillaise. But there's a second song they also always play every 14th of July, which is called Le Chant des Partisans, the Song of Partisans. And the partisans were the fighters of the Communist Party, the French Communist Party. Now, I think and everybody knows that the presidents of the Republic in France are anything but communists. I mean, think of Macron, think of Sarkozy, was anti-communist even. But he was also, every 14th of July, singing Le Chant des Partisans with conviction and fanaticism. If you analyze the text of that song, it's about cutting throats of enemy soldiers. It's about the Communist Party. It's about workers and the peasants carrying weapons and fighting. But the French right-wingers like Chirac, like Sarkozy would sing it. Why? Because it honors the fighters of the French resistance, whom many of them were communists. So this is a symbolic song of the resistance. And then, of course, there's nuance. And then they understand that, yes, of course, we do not endorse that, but we celebrate resistance as a right. And well, when it comes to Palestine, all this nuance and all this understanding of the legal right of resistance, the moral right of resistance, all of a sudden vanishes and resistance is considered as the aggression. The reality is inversed, and all of a sudden it is the resistant who fights for their life and the survival of their people and for right, actually, and for ethics, who has to prove that they are aligned with certain criteria, while the aggressor, the occupier, the genocidaire is considered beyond any doubt, and as the initial normal situation. So this is very, very shocking to me. Of course, there were always resistance. Whenever there's occupation, whenever there's oppression, aggression, there's always resistance. This is human nature as well. Human beings resist against oppression, they resist against occupation. So, but the problem is always the aggression, it's always the occupation, it's always the oppression. That's the problem. Um, Now, regarding Sabra and Shatila was a massacre committed in Lebanon in 1982, that same year that I was describing when I was talking about Israeli tanks coming into Lebanon. At a certain moment, there was an agreement in Beirut between, brokered by the Americans, as always presenting themselves as fair brokers, which wasn't the case, of course, but it was brokered by the Americans and signed between the Palestinian resistance at that time, who was in Beirut, and the Israelis. And it stipulated that the Palestinian resistance would leave Beirut, would be evacuated to other countries, Tunisia, Algeria, other countries, and that the Israeli army will not enter Beirut, because the Israeli army could not enter Beirut prior to the deal, right? Beirut resisted for almost like 25 days, and everybody realized that if they will enter Beirut, it will be like a Stalingrad battle. So they wanted to avoid that, and the resistance wanted to avoid that, also not to put the population in that position, and that deal was brokered and signed. So what happened? The Palestinian resistance retreated. The Lebanese resistance who was fighting with them also retreated from the city. And immediately after what happened, the Israeli army entered Beirut. Totally disregarded the agreement, totally neglected any American guarantees, or did not respect them. If they were anyway made to be respected, that's an open question. And they entered Beirut. And when they entered Beirut, after some there was always a pretext to a massacre. A genocide has always a pretext. So there was a political assassination in Lebanon against Bashir Gemayel, who was a far-right collaborator with Israel. And he was elected by the Israeli bayonets to become a president of Lebanon under occupation. Well, I mean, the deputies of parliament were brought by Israeli tanks from their homes to parliament to vote for him. And he was assassinated. And as a pretext, this was used to attack the Palestinian camps of Sabra and Shatila. These are Palestinian refugee camps, but also these are places where a lot of poor Lebanese were living. And Lebanese collaborating militias, just like in our village, entered Sabra and Shatila camp under Israeli protection, under Israeli logistic support, and executed 3 days long, executed a carnage, killing civilians, starting with babies to the elderly. And, it was one of the worst acts of butchery and barbarism that you could ever imagine. And that lasted 3 days long. At night, because, there was, of course, no electricity during that war period. And at night, the Israelis would light the camps for the phalangists, for the collaborators, so that they could see where they are moving to kill more. They would provide them with bulldozers to bulldoze ways, but also to create mass graves. Israeli soldiers were watching everything, including Ariel Sharon, and talking up to each other about it. And so it was an Israeli massacre. It was, again, that same model that was used by the Nazis in Ukraine. Send the neo-Nazis, who are today Azov brigades, send those, kill the Jews, and then say that, oh, we Germans, we're civilized people, we feel bad about what our allies done. A lot of people forget this chapter of the history of the Second World War. So this same MO was deployed in Sabra and Shatila. It was a terrible massacre. And in 2000, I filed a case together with, I was at the time a chairman of an organization called the Arab European League. So we started a branch called the Sabra and Shatila Committee because Belgium adopted universal jurisdiction in its law. And we saw that it was applied on the Rwandan genocide. So we thought, okay, well, we have the Sabra and Shatila massacre, and this is as important because it's a genocide, it's an act of genocide. So we should file. And we did file a case in Belgium. Long story short, Belgium changed the law afterwards and made it more difficult to gain access to this universal jurisdiction because of the pressure that was put on Belgium back then uh, by the Israelis and by the Americans. Because it was the first case that garnered international attention because it had a serious chance of getting into results. I remember at the time, we're talking 2000, 25 years ago, the Israelis issued communication to their senior officers not to travel to Europe because they were fearing arrests. So they had to do something about the law. And the Belgian genocide law was weakened, requiring a direct nexus, a direct connection between the perpetrator, the victim, and the country, Belgium, which wasn't the case prior to that. So it was a moment that was also for me like milestone in terms of understanding the mechanisms, how law and politics intersect, and how also we should take that into consideration in our strategies.
Yeah. And speaking of the intersections of law, you co-founded the Hind Rajab Foundation. Can you, for people in the audience who don't know, tell us who was Hind Rajab and what happened to her January 29th, 2024? And based on that, why did you decide that she would be the figurehead for this movement?
Since the start of the genocide, we were already experimenting with legal cases against dual nationals. These are soldiers who are taking part in the Israeli genocide in Gaza, but also carry the nationality of another country. So we figured that since they have that nationality, there is a nexus, there's a connection to these countries, enabling us to file against them even without very strong universal jurisdiction laws, because they are nationals of these countries. So we started filing cases. We were doing that under the name March 30 movement then. We did not have the Hind Rajab Foundation. We were starting to see that this is an effective strategy because of the Israeli reaction to it. We were immediately threatened. There were some hysterical reactions. The Israelis tried to move local law enforcement against us to intimidate us. So we figured, okay, they don't like this. That angers them. So maybe we are onto something. We should keep doing this more. And we also realized that we need to kind of even though nothing is without politics, but we felt that to be more efficient, we need to diminish the political narrative around this legal work. So while doing it as March 30 movement, when you say movement, it's like something that, it implies ideology, it implies ideas, So not everybody wants to be part of a movement. However, a lot of people would like to help fighting for justice without entering a complex political analysis. So we thought, okay, we should create an entity that is not the March 30 movement, that doesn't require ideological alignment, and that can mobilize a lot of people and a lot of resources for this fight against Israeli impunity. As we were thinking about a possible name for this new organization, the crime of Hind Rajab, the murder of Hind Rajab, happened. And I remember this is something that really deeply shocked me as a person because for all the crimes that Israel committed, even during the genocide, there's always a MO in which the Israelis are trying to pretend that they are not committing crimes. They're always trying to say, well, look, actually, it wasn't us, or, well, these guys were used as human shields, or collateral damage, or even if they admit of killing someone, they will say, "Oh, that was a mistake. Okay, sorry, we did not mean to." So there was always this typical state violence etiquette, that you have to recite almost like mantras to say, "Well, I'm innocent," while you are cutting throats, But like this is how state violence operates, and Israel is a master of that, in that kind of communication. So I thought, well, I'm sure you remember the call of Hind with the Palestinian Red Crescent went viral while Hind was still stuck in the car and still alive or believed to be alive. But I mean, it was unfolding in real time, the case. So I thought, oh, this poor girl is stuck, but alhamdulillah, thank God, it leaked. So now they're gonna get her out because even the Israelis can never afford to hurt her now. I mean, I'm sure they will let an ambulance get her,
And
right?
just to clarify, people are not aware of this story. I mean, her name is everywhere, thank goodness, thanks to a new film as well. But she was stuck in the car surrounded by the bodies of her dead relatives, and very
Correct.
clearly the only survivor there, and
Yeah,
surrounded by Israeli gunfire and tanks.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and like, indeed, you're right to point this out because, Hind was stuck in that car. The first attack on the car killed all the adults and injured Hind and her niece, I think, or her cousin, who was 12-year-old. And then her cousin called the Palestinian Red Crescent, and while on the call, she was killed. You could hear because she was saying, "Oh, the tank is near me. The tank is near me." And then you hear shots, and then she succumbed and she died. And then after a little while, Hind picked up the phone and called. And so anyway, Hind was on the phone after all this, surrounded by dead bodies of her loved ones. And I'm a father, and to imagine, I have a kid, I have a daughter who's 5, so the same age of Hind, and to imagine that my daughter is going through that and picking up the phone and calling and saying everybody's dead around me because Hind used these words. It's like a horror movie. It's something that's beyond thinking. So that was something that touched me and touched millions of people while it was unfolding, and I was convinced for all the distrust or justifiable lack of faith and any humanity on the side of the Israeli army. I was convinced that they will save her because they cannot afford not to for PR, right? To my shock and to everybody's shock, this became demonstrations by the Israelis of the level of impunity with which they are operating and the lack of accountability and how they feel above not only the law, but above all of humanity in terms of their privilege of doing whatever they want to Palestinians.
Mm.
And what happened is that after granting the permission to the ambulance to go there, the Israeli troops who were on the ground not only moved and killed Hind with 350 bullets, they also they bombed the hospital, not the hospital, the ambulance. They shelled the ambulance and killed the medics, 2 medics who were sent to save her.
Mm. Yeah.
And so if you analyze that, I mean, they've done that knowing that the whole world is watching. They've done that knowing that there's a child there because the whole world knew that there's a child there. So the Israeli state knew that there's a child there. The soldiers on the ground knew it. It was a global thing. And they've done that knowing that they granted permission to ambulance to do it. And then, of course, after say, "Oh, it wasn't us. It was Hamas who did it," right? I mean, this is the typical like when they killed Shireen Abu Akleh. It's not us. It's Palestinian fight. It's not us. So it's basically, I don't know how to describe it. It goes beyond. I mean, it's a psychological phenomenon, right? It's like you can describe it on any way, but it's a form of psychopathy. It's a form of this is not normal human behavior. This goes beyond it, right? So for me, that was a defining moment of that genocide
Yeah.
that symbolized a lot.
Yeah, no, it was very important, Diab. But as you said, even with Shireen Abu Akleh, they still, their modus operandi will investigate, like who investigates themselves as the perpetrators, and they get away with it again and again and again. So it's like it's been ongoing for years, and as you say, with impunity.
Absolutely.
So I'm
Yeah.
glad, I'm glad your organization is doing something about it. We'll talk about
So,
that.
yeah, I mean, like giving the name to this organization, giving the name of Hind Rajab to this organization was also a statement that, you know what, you know, this doesn't end here. Okay, you're not gonna get away with this. And that was, you know, and since then, the fact that we carry this name is a huge responsibility. Of course, we asked the family, we communicated to the family prior to doing this. So, and but since then, the responsibility we feel by carrying this name and what it symbolizes in terms of the suffering of all people, all innocent people who are killed in Gaza, you know, whether are men and women or children, because there's a tendency of saying, oh, the children of Gaza, as if the life of women and men in Gaza is expendable, you know, oh, they are adults, you can kill them. Oh, but the children, of course, it's more horrible to kill the children, but to kill any innocent person is horrible. But anyway, this was for us and something that added commitment to what we were doing. It made it I don't know. For me, every day I wake up still with that idea. You know, like we have a vocation, we have something, we have a duty towards not just the idea of justice, not just the commitment to justice in Palestine, but also to the memory of Hind and all the other victims. You know, it's something that drives us further.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're not a lawyer, but you decided that this battle has to be the foundation works in the legal arena. So tell us a little bit about that strategy. You've built, for example, you've had cases against over 1,000 Israeli soldiers using evidence that they themselves have posted of their war crimes on TikTok. Can you walk us through that methodology? How do you turn like a TikTok video of an Israeli soldier destroying a Palestinian home into a war crimes prosecution?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it all started basically when we were like doing research. So indeed, I'm not a lawyer. So we were just researching the facts, what happened there, who's doing what. And then we started seeing this trend of Israeli soldiers posting a lot of stuff. And we thought, okay, but they cannot post crimes and get away with it. Like somebody should do something about it. And it wasn't our reflex to do something ourselves about it. So we were waiting for the states to take initiative because we remember when people, young Muslims in Europe were starting to go and join ISIS and Al Qaeda and committing atrocities also against Yazidis in Iraq or against other population groups in Syria and so on. We remember that European law enforcement moved on them at a certain moment, started building cases, and we thought this should happen, especially for the Europeans who are doing this, because this was what confronted us first. Our our citizens, our compatriots are doing this because we were seeing accounts from Belgium, from the Netherlands, committing these kind of crimes, but nothing happened. They did not move on that. And then we said, okay, well, then we will go and do it. And we started researching, of course, and the first initial phase to talk about the methodology uh, we would indeed take a video from TikTok or from Instagram and make a case around it and file it. And that case would be rejected because this is not enough, of course, to make a legal filing. You cannot just take a video and say, look, I see this person, I think their crime, go investigate it. Definitely not when you're going after Israeli impunity. Because that impunity is real. The level of protection is real. The level of sensitivity is real, right? It might work if you're going against, let's say, a young Muslim kid from Antwerp. If you show them blowing up a home or killing a civilian, I think that's enough to move on them, but not an Israeli soldier. That doesn't work like that. That's the reality of the world, right? So we thought, okay, we need actually to do the whole work for the cops, for the law enforcement. We cannot count on that. We need to do the whole work, then give them a complete file and tell them, look, here it is. You have everything there. So we started researching what we need, right? We don't just need lawyers. We need forensic researchers. So we started gathering teams of forensic researchers and building the expertise. So it's a very complex procedure. And we went from very simple cases in the beginning, 2 years ago, they were easily dismissed, to now cases that force the authority against their political intention to go and arrest or to go and investigate. So, but we only are able of doing this now because of this, let's say, accumulation of expertise and learning curve that we had, and also gathering all these human resources that are now part of our research team, and of course our legal team. Because when you give this to the lawyers, what we do is always we hire lawyers, external lawyers. We don't. Our own legal team do paralegal research prior, of course, and they work together with the forensic team and with the researchers, and they produce a report. That report is almost finished work. And you give it, but then we see, for example, that this particular or one member of that particular unit landed in, let's say, Greece, right? So then we go and hire a Greek lawyer, and then we are their client, so they work for us, and we give them the report that is ready. And of course, our own lawyers are at their service to talk with them. But that Greek lawyer has, of course, to translate that work into legal procedures in Greece, and to lead that process with the Greek authorities.
It's incredible. And also, I think just for the audience, a lot of when you say dual citizens, a lot of whether they're American or European or Canadian, they don't even serve in their own countries. But when it comes to Israel, they rush to go and serve and commit their atrocities. But it's quite detailed what you do and incredible. And I think that's why the Israeli government, they called your work as lawfare. I hadn't heard that before. And you said you were threatened before, and I think one Israeli minister told you or wrote, watch your pager, which is referring to the horrific recent pager attacks, the device attacks in Lebanon. So they're clearly worried, as you said, about the work you're doing, and they continue to threaten you. But Dyab, you're very brave. You still carry on. You're undeterred. Can you talk about what you've been through and also what drives you, despite the threats, despite being targeted, to keep going?
Well, regarding how the Israelis look at us, of course, initially when we were filing the first cases, they were already annoyed, right? Because they were saying, oh, they are doxing the soldiers. So they were annoyed by just the fact that we are revealing their identity. However, we were not doxing because of course, we have lawyers, and we asked the lawyers, look, what can we do and what can we not do? And we were clear that we are in the frame of litigation. You can communicate about who are you suing. That's no problem. Every plaintiff has the right to say, if I'm suing you, I have the right to say, I'm suing Hanan Kattan. I can mention your name, and that's my right? If I'm a journalist writing about that, I might not have the right to mention your name. I might have to I might need to put HK. Okay, but as a plaintiff, you can always communicate the name of who you're suing. That's your right? So we knew we were not doxing. We're plaintiff. We're filing cases, right? But they were only annoyed by that, and I think they believed, and they were right at that moment, that our cases are not serious enough. That we don't have a lot of evidence. We just have these videos, and then oh, that's not gonna lead to anything. This is not how you build a case. But we learned how we build a case. We were also learning. We did not stick to these initial, simple cases, and we started building the expertise. And then they realized that when we filed one case in Cyprus against a guy called Liebman, and was a war criminal, and he landed in Cyprus, and we filed a case against him in Cyprus. And that case was different. They already noticed. I think they have access somehow to the cases. So they noticed, oh, wait a minute, this is a problem here. And they smuggled that guy out of Cyprus, like in emergency style. And it was at that moment that Israeli media started writing about the Hind Rajab Foundation, and started writing a lot about the Hind Rajab Foundation. And at that same moment, after the Liebman case in Cyprus, they started a commission, Israeli commission, where you have different ministries on board, including the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Defense, but also including the Shabak and the Mossad, which are like, their FBI and CIA. They were on board to think how to, what they say, support the soldiers when they are facing legal challenges. But they were mentioning the Liebman case as an example. So After that, there was a case in Brazil where we took it a step further. The case in Brazil was even better, much better than the Leave Mine case, much better done. And that led to a judge in Brazil for the first time, because in Cyprus, there were just the investigation open, whether they will admit it or not. And still the Israelis panicked because I think somehow they saw the case and somehow they realized, oh, this might lead to something. In Brazil, it led to something. A judge issued, well, let me be accurate. I wouldn't call it an arrest warrant. It was a warrant. They call it to a probe order, meaning that the police has to intercept and interrogate and probe the suspect, which is as good as arrest, right? So, but that was a shock for the Israelis and for everyone because it's the first time that a local judge applies universal jurisdiction and the Rome Statute, particularly, without an arrest warrant from the ICC. So, and when we first started talking, and you mentioned the question about that I'm not a lawyer. And now my lawyer colleagues who I work with, they tell me that's an advantage that you're not a lawyer. Because a lawyer would have never done this, because this is new terrain. Because when I was talking to lawyers initially, I remember, and I was saying, look, in principle, we don't even need the Rome Statute because, of course, I know international law, but not as a lawyer. I know it theoretically. I studied international law at university also, and I said, okay, we have the Geneva Convention that says there's the obligation to either prosecute or extradite war crimes, right? War criminals. So we don't need even the Rome Statute. We don't even need it. In principle, you can ask. And then the lawyers were saying, well, this is customary international law, but it's like shaky terrain. And they're right. But, I was naively at that time, maybe naively, but actually now it's starting to work, thinking, no, we can do it because we don't have to follow these procedures. So that was an advantage in the sense that I wasn't like conditioned by being a lawyer to consider our strategy on the onset as nonsense because it sounded like nonsense. I remember one lawyer who refused to work with us initially, a very important lawyer for us now too, and he refused to work with us. And in the call, I was talking to him, and he said to me, "Well, yeah, I thought initially that this is nonsense, that this is totally nonsense, and that it's even counterproductive. Because when you go against these soldiers, it's only good if you can do it en masse and globally. But nobody can do that, so it's going to be counterproductive." And then when I asked him when he started working with us, that what changed your mind? He said, "Well, I watched the foundation do it en masse and globally. I never thought it could be done. But if it was done because so many people joined the foundation. And it's actually, the foundation is empowered by thousands of volunteers globally. So it became a global organization. It's not, if I was alone with the people who started, we would have never done that en masse and globally. It's all these people who joined the foundation that empowered it into having first this global reach, which is impressive even for the Israelis and for us every day. Every day I'm impressed by what our foundation is doing. I'm surprised by the capabilities. I'm surprised by the people we have. So this is something that every day I'm still impressed by. So I understand all these people who said this cannot be done. And indeed, that's why I said this initial idea I had was naive. That we could, with the resources that we had at the onset, but the foundation became something different. It tapped into something deep and powerful. And this is what enabled this strategy. So after that, of course, the Israelis started losing their mind because they realized, oh, what's happening here is not just some symbolic legal, activism. What's happening here is a serious attempt at, holding our soldiers and our staff members for account. So this is something that I think changed their scope. And of course, unfortunately, when the Brazil case happened, one I was posting something about it because of course they smuggled the soldiers. They smuggled them to Argentina, then to Miami, then to Israel. And then I was posting something about it, deploring that justice was obstructed by complicity, by these kind of practices. And that minister, Amichai Shikli, who's the minister of diaspora and the combat against anti-Semitism, he came and he started trolling like a average troll on X. he was answering under my tweet, and he was saying like, oh yeah, like yeah, Mr. Human Rights, activist, you think you're gonna get your way like that? And I just said, you don't need to troll. Just take a good lawyer, because what are we doing at the end, Just take a good lawyer, and then we'll see. And then he said, no, what's your pager? So in a way, he was saying actually the message he was conveying. No, no, no. We're not gonna take lawyers. We're gonna deal with this differently, And that was like okay. So yeah, it's something that's ongoing. There are attempts to disrupt what we're doing. Whether they will succeed, I doubt it, because I mean they are definitely resourceful and they're definitely powerful. They have a lot of friends and they have a lot of allies. I'm talking about the Israeli states, obviously. But I think, this genocide has also shifted a lot of, variables. And I think we now also have a lot of friends and a lot of allies. And so I don't think it will be easy to erase what happened. And I don't think it will be easy to escape justice forever. They might delay it. But I think the accumulation and the continuation of this work and other work, of course, done by other organizations, by other institutes, the accumulation of everything eventually will lead to some form of accountability.
Inshallah, as we say. And it is incredible the work that you're doing and the volunteers that you have. It's truly you've I think this genocide has hit a core, and I think so many people are frustrated. But some of your critics still, or how do you handle the critics who say that you're targeting the low-ranking soldiers, while the commanders and the politicians who order these operations remain untouched? And then others argue that pursuing individual soldiers rather than the state, the settler colony of Israel, gets them off the hook, if you like. So how do you respond to these critiques?
Yeah. Well, I think this critique has been outed in the beginning, early on, but I think within the circles that matter to us, meaning allies and pro-Palestinian or solidarity movement, I think this critique dissipated with us showing that this can work. Because, however, on the critique coming from the other side, as such, yeah, we're not really focusing on that. But to answer it on content, first of all, it was an untouched terrain. Nobody ever went after these rank and file. And everybody was going historically against the leaders and the politicians and the high officers, right? Especially the politicians. And that is good. We also filed cases against politicians. We filed cases against Herzog. We filed cases against Gideon Saar. We even filed cases against Olmert and Tzipi Livni for what they've done in 2008. Because for us, they're now playing the good guys, going around, being paid for lectures and sometimes by people adjacent to the solidarity movement, and they're selling themselves as, the enlightened. But they have blood on their hands, and they committed genocidal massacres in 2008 in Gaza. Operation Cast Lead was a genocidal onslaught on Gaza as well. And these crimes don't have a statute of limitation. And our message to them, well, we're going after you, and we will be going after the perpetrators of these crimes, of this genocide, also 20 years later and 40 years later. So we do file against politicians and against the state. We have also filed many ICC cases against the state. We file against complicits. We got the European Investment Bank to review its policy. Now it is investigating itself. Of course, we don't know if that will lead to anything. But we force them to investigate their grants that they're giving to certain entities that are financing federal colonialism and the West Bank. So the HRF is doing all these things too. But indeed, this is not our core business. These are exceptional cases. Our core business remains the rank and file. And why do we believe that this is, I will not say more important, let us say as important? Because these people, these war criminals who first of all, these are the people who commit the genocide on the ground, who commit the war crimes. So they are literally, having blood on their hands. Secondly, they do not have immunity. Like when I say we filed against Gideon Saar, our case in the UK was rejected because of immunity argument. Okay. There is a minimalist and maximalist interpretation of immunity. And the maximalist interpretation, which is used always to protect Israel, he has immunity. The same goes against, any other Israeli minister, right? Um, so when you go against Netanyahu, he doesn't have immunity when the ICC issued arrest warrants against him. But imagine there was no arrest warrant against Netanyahu. It would be like also impossible for us to file against him while he's in office, right? But the ICC issued arrest warrant against him, and that's great. That's maybe the most important thing that happened on the legal battlefront, even more important maybe than our work. But of course, he still enjoys geopolitical protection, right? You cannot reach him. You do not touch his life, really. Okay, you prevent him from visiting maybe France and Belgium and maybe the UK even. That's sensitive, but that's it, right? He still can go and have stand ovation in the Congress and etc. But these soldiers, when they land in Thailand for their vacation after killing people and they want to go just, relax before coming back. And then they have to run away from Thailand the next day. They have to escape. You're touching their life. You're touching the life of their family. You're getting some form of accountability already that, oh, wait a minute, we are not above the law. And if they get caught, like the two in Belgium who get, handcuffed and taken, and, this is a very strong effect in your own life. We're beyond. We're not anymore in the level of communication and the level of litigation. We passed into the level of action in real life. I mean, to put it like that, but it's absolutely true because we researched it. This is the first time in the history of the conflict, if you call it conflict, I mean, struggle. It's the first time that an Israeli citizen has been handcuffed, let alone a soldier. Any Israeli citizen has been handcuffed for crimes committed against Palestinians. Never happened before. This was the first case. And it was possible because nobody could say, oh, they have immunity because he's minister of I don't know what, and he's like elected in I don't know what assembly. He has immunity. No immunity. He's a soldier, normal citizen, no immunity. We can arrest him. So this is building up, and that's why they know they're vulnerable. Okay. At the end of the day, we're talking about the army. We're talking about the genocidal army. We're not going after Israeli citizens just like any Israeli citizen. We're also not going after any Israeli soldier. Because a lot of people think, oh, yeah, you're filing as Israeli soldiers. No, we're not. We're filing against soldier against whom we have evidence that they have committed individually themselves war crimes. And the best proof remains how the Israeli side reacts to it. When you touch that sacred aspect of the Israeli society, which is the military, the reaction is heavier than when you file against a politician. For example, when we file against Olmert, you have a lot of people who sometimes comment from the Israeli right. Oh, great, yeah, take him. We want to get rid of him. When you file against Netanyahu, the same thing. A lot of Israelis say, oh, yeah, take him. We don't want him. Zionists, people who support the genocide, but they don't like the guy. Okay. These are politicians, but the army in Israel is sacrilege when you attack the army. And it makes sense because actually a lot of people say, well, a lot of states have armies. Israel is maybe an army that has a state.
The citizen army. Yeah, citizen army. And it's what keeps them glued together, right?
But Dyab, I wanted to ask you, the UN Commission has concluded finally that Israel committed genocide in Gaza. They used Hind Rajab's killing as an example. And a recent study by the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research gives a median estimate that 112,000 Palestinians have been killed. That's not even including the thousands that still lie buried beneath the rubble and haven't been found. And yet, despite this fake ceasefire, the genocide and killing of Palestinians continues every single day, with daily Israeli bombardments and the prevention of aid and shelter coming in during the winter at anything like the agreed levels. How do you process, prioritize working on the accountability for past crimes while all these new crimes are being committed every day? Is that something you have to think about, or?
First of all, it doesn't surprise us. I mean, we believe that this is a battle for a whole generation, and also for everyone. We don't believe that this is something that only our organization will be able of, dealing with. I think we are part of a whole, and we should have no illusions. Justice will not come swiftly, but it will come. It will come if we persist, if we keep going after it. Like I said, look at Olmert and Livni. They committed crimes, but they can sell themselves again, reinvent themselves, and sell themselves as doves. They're not. And these soldiers, uh, we will remain alert to whatever they do for the rest of their lives. I mean, when I say we as an organization, we'll go after them. When now they are in their 20s, when they are in their 30s, when they are in their 40s, when they are in their 50s. Of course, this is the goal. Okay, we hope that we can match that. I'm not talking about myself as a person. I would be gone by then, but we hope to create this organization in that sense, to build it and strengthen it in that sense, but also that other organizations will start copying what we're doing and doing it. So what we're building basically is a database, is an information center, right? And we're filing these cases. Of course, we're getting also results with these cases, and these cases are escalating, getting more important, getting more qualitative, and we keep improving. But even if we don't succeed in arresting anyone, because in Belgium they released these two, okay? We're happy that they arrested them, even if it's for a few hours. We're happy with the way they arrested them, because they could have waited for them to go to the airport and just have some Q&A with them, like they did with the Brazilian guy in Brazil. No, they went and they took them by force, right? That's an escalation. That's a step forward. But anyway, imagine we get no arrests. Well, still, we are putting them all on the record of states. So every time we file a case, whether it's to the ICC or to a national legislation, we are giving a body of evidence against a war criminal with their name and their picture, but also the crimes they have committed, and putting it on a national record. Okay. And we are keeping it there. So these crimes, like I said, they do not expire. And we will, of course, keep copies of this evidence in other places. We will not rely fully on the states, but putting it on official archives in all these states is very important for the future. And I hope one day people will be listening to this podcast and will be thinking, maybe we should, when the political reality shifts and when the possibility of going after these war criminals becomes more conducive to justice than it is now, then people can go and reactivate these cases. I think a year ago in Belgium there was a case of genocide, of not genocide, but types of crimes against humanity in Honduras that was litigated after 30 years of the facts, 30 years, and the judge issued a sentence. It was involving a Belgian victim against some Hondurasian generals. And there was a sentence after 30 years, and everybody, all the experts went, and they're right. They went on the media and they were telling there's no statute of limitation crimes against humanity. Well, we are building that body of evidence, and maybe if it's not this year, next year, the year after, maybe in 20, maybe in 30 years. This is how we have to reason, right? Some people say, "Oh, you're doing like how is it called, the Wiesenthal Center, right?" I got that question in one podcast or one interview. Are you like the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the center that went after the Nazi criminals?
Yeah.
Well, maybe in the intention, yes, but not in the reality. Because when the Wiesenthal Center went after Nazi criminals, everybody was against Nazis. Nazis were hated everywhere. The Nazi Germany was defeated. Nobody was saying, "Oh, Nazi Germany was defending itself." Nobody was saying, "Oh, you're committing acts of violence against the Nazi army? Are you a terrorist?" Nobody was saying that. It was in a conducive environment to go after these Nazi criminals. Well, we are working in a hostile environment. We are working in an environment that is going after the people who are seeking justice, sanctioning people like Francesca Albanese, sanctioning people like Karim Khan and the ICC for doing their job, even with delay, doing their job. and issuing arrest warrants. They're being sanctioned. Judges of the ICC cannot open a bank account. They cannot use a credit card because they are on an American sanctions list. We are in a world that is still applauding the killer, that is still applauding the genocidaires, that is still defending them and criminalizing anybody who dares to speak the truth against them. Now, nothing is eternal, and this balance of power is also not eternal. It will eventually shift, and it's starting to shift with awareness, with the narrative. But I believe personally that a shift in narrative is only a reflection of a shift in balances of power. And if it's not that, it can be dissipated. So we need to build also networks. We need to build also new power to be able of sustaining this. Otherwise, this can, be very volatile and can disappear because the Israelis are going to counterattack. They're not only going to counterattack with violence and repression, they're going to counterattack also on the level of narrative. They're investing in a counter story. They want to erase the facts and rewrite it, like they've done with the Nakba, like they've done with many things. So this battle is going to be raging for far beyond the time of our lives, I believe. But I think we have a duty now to see it coming and to try to always build strategic, alliances and approaches. Our organization is strategic in its litigation strategy. So we are building a pipeline and we are archiving. So these are the two things we're doing. That
Right.
pipeline is already very extensive. If we want to do the pipeline that we already have in terms of cases, we will need at least maybe 10, 15 years. So we're going to keep filing cases, regardless, as long as we exist. But yeah, I think, like I said, this is not a task that will depend on us only. I think we need everyone, and everybody needs, I think this solidarity movement needs to, become like an incubator for a real change. And I think this is the challenge that we all have to deal with, whether it's organizations like ours, whether it's people like yourselves who are also part of this fight for awareness and for narrative. It's something that we all need to be working toward, and otherwise we're not going to, otherwise the shift that we feel now is going to be short lasted. It's not going to last long.
Yeah. Well, you touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about the battle for the narrative itself. It's not, when Hind Rajab was killed, I think CNN described her as a woman, not a 5-6-year-old girl. Major Western legacy media outlets refused to attribute Hind's death to Israel, though she was alone in a car surrounded by tanks and snipers. Your foundation's work forces the world to name what's happening, but mainstream legacy media is still manufacturing consent. They're still not covering, they're still omitting the fact that the ceasefire has been broken hundreds of times by Israel. And so everyday people in the street are not aware of the accountability that they should have in this Gaza genocide. How do you see this relationship between the legal accountability that you've created this pipeline for and reclaiming the narrative and bringing even Western legacy media to justice in its own way?
Yeah, this is a very important debate, I think, because I think the same dynamic that you see with the Western media and you see also in the Western justice system. All structures are not programmed to go against power. They are programmed to give legitimacy to power and to actually accommodate power and to hide the crimes of power. So if I look at international law, for example, international law was created with a lot of ambition, and the text is brilliant. The text of international law is brilliant, right? But if you look how it was always applied, it was always applied against enemies of empire, against enemies of the dominant powers, right? So and rightfully, these enemies also committed crimes and they deserve to be judged, right? For example, if you look at what happened in Bosnia, like the genocide of Srebrenica is a terrible genocide. I mean, the nationalists, the Serbian nationalists, they committed a genocidal massacre that looks like Srebrenica. And they get punished for it. They get punished for it because they are enemies of the United States, because they are enemies of the West, right? Not because they are criminals and they deserve, because they do deserve it. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. But the only reason why they were punished is because they were not aligned with the interests of the United States. If you go look at the Ukraine-Russia situation, right? I mean, you have there a large power, which is Russia, trying to project imperial power around itself, like the United States does, the same way. This is our backyard. We should dominate it, right? This is how they look at Ukraine. That's our backyard, right? The same logic as the United States, the same logic as the West, right? And then they act upon it, like the US has invaded so many countries, and they act on it. They invade Ukraine. And if you look at the international law, of course, this is a breach. This is a big breach of international law. It's against international law. Okay. There, international law was applied. Again, it's a wannabe power, not the dominant power, not the United States. It's a competition, and then immediately, like the ICC issued arrest warrants, and nobody was threatening the ICC. Nobody was saying, you will be sanctioned. They were uploaded. Okay. Of course, that arrest warrant against Putin will never be applied because, it's still symbolic, but nonetheless. So, and then comes the genocide in Gaza, and then it's an ally of the dominant power, it's a proxy of it, Israel, that is committing the atrocities. Okay. And then international law stumbles, it doesn't work, it doesn't function, just like with the Sharon case in 2000. Not only it doesn't work, it is forced, the country was forced to change its law. Belgium, under pressure, had to change its law to accommodate the crime, not to punish the crime. So, however, there's something. The good news is, because there is a good news here. With Gaza happened in a different context, in a changing context. The globalization, communication revolution, it's a different context. It's not like during the Cold War. It's not even during the 90s. We were not dependent on the legacy media to see the genocide. We could see it on the social media. We could see it, in different other platforms, right? And so, first of all, manufacturing consent needs some kind of exclusivity of narrative. The Western media lost that. They don't have exclusivity of narrative. Podcasts, social media accounts, alternative media is a serious competition on that level, right? So when you cannot manufacture consent as a narrative, then you have a lot of narratives to choose from, and people are starting to make their own opinions. Sometimes that's a bad thing, sometimes that's a good thing, but on general, it's always a good thing, because even when the people are wrong, well, it's their right to be wrong, right? Let them be wrong, rather than being manipulated. I'd rather having people being wrong than being manipulated into some kind of idea. So anyway, that genocide also was committed by, and this will be shocking maybe for some viewers, it was committed by Gen Z. Just like it was protested against by Gen Z. I mean, if you look at these soldiers, why are they posting everything? Well, there's a sense of eternal Israeli impunity and feeling above the law and everything, but there's something, I think, stronger than that, which is they are children of their generation, and their generation posts everything online. The Israeli army is at loss trying to prevent them from doing that, and we know that because they're giving them directive after directive to stop using social media, stop using cellular phones, and they're not listening, and they keep posting because they cannot do otherwise. This is their culture as a generation, okay? And these are young kids of 18, 19, 20-year-old, and they're posting, all the time posting, okay? So they gave us the material, they gave the world their crimes to be seen. Their generation, their fellow generational Gen Zers, they saw that and they were shocked by it, and they started protesting it. So this is a changing world. And international law is now then entering a phase where it is becoming real for the first time in its history. It has never been real. It has always been applied only against the enemies of the dominant power and not against its friends or itself. But now, for the first time, it's becoming problematic. Law in general is becoming problematic for the dominant powers. If you look at international law, look how they're reacting to the ICC. Look how they are reacting to us and to everybody who's working on advocacy for justice. But also, this does not limit itself to international law outside of the countries. Within the countries, one of the big battles between the powers that let's say, the conservative fascist line is against the state of law, is against the rule of law, is against against judges, against regulations. If you see the narrative, like in the United States, of how Trump communicates, he's attacking judges systematically. The far right in Europe is talking all the time about this unworldly, unhinged judges who are activists for, So law is becoming real. Law is emerging now as a real thing. And I'm not saying it's at the stage where it's already victorious. No, but there's like a twilight zone now where you find that the text of the law that was just actually empty of any value and only made to be applied against Milosevic and against Putin and against enemies of empire is now, also haunting Netanyahu and going maybe to haunt Trump and maybe going to haunt other people in terms. So there's an emergence of a new reality, which is liberating. However, we are not still 100% there. There's a battle ongoing, and we still might lose this battle. I mean, there's nothing that says we will absolutely win it. No, we might lose it. But we have to be aware because a lot of us we're trained by the past experiences to be cynical toward anything legal because we know how law has been instrumentalized and used against oppressed people and marginalized people. So we're kind of critical and so to dismiss any potential of law emerging as really what it should be. However, I believe it is possible now. And this new generation, this new mobilization, this new balance of power that can emerge now can invigorate law also and make it something that is more real than it has ever been. It's not sure it will happen, but it's there. It's in the battlefield. It's something that we should be, working towards.
No, I'm glad you think so because it was quite, if you like, sad to hear of all these cases of people escaping justice. But I'm glad it's a long-term project and you'll get there. Because really individual actions matter, but the strength is in numbers, in collective pressure. And I think you also said, and I quote, this task, as you said, is for a whole generation. So this sort of accountability and the legal work that you're doing, it's part of the whole ecosystem, the Palestinian liberation, if you like, and justice. And if our audience or anybody listening to this podcast, they see or they come across Israeli soldiers with problematic social media posts or bragging or whatever it is in their own countries, what should they do and how can your organization, your foundation, help them achieve whatever needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important aspect because we are absolutely depending on the mobilization of the movement in the broad sense of the word, the solidarity movement, because we are clear about who we are to start with. We do not represent the Palestinian people. We do not represent, we cannot talk for the Palestinian people or say what the Palestinian people need to do or not to do. We are part of the solidarity movement. We are in solidarity with the Palestinian people and we are fighting for justice. So this is very important because, it kind of, defines our scope of action and our role. We do not have the ambition to be more than this. We're this. We're a machine that is directed towards a certain goal. So, however, we are fueled by the movement, the broad solidarity movement, whether it's on volunteers, people who have all kinds of skills are part of the HRF today, and we always are looking for new people, whether they are new lawyers, because we have like 200 to 300 lawyers who are doing paralegal work, but we always need more. We need more developers because we make, for example, our own. Sorry if I'm very too concrete on this, but this is exactly how we think. We always think in this. If you ask me what do we need skills. We need skills of people, talents, whether it's legal or whether it's on the level of IT and development, coding, audiovisual work, all kinds of talents. So we're always looking for talent. And secondly, of course, the information I think we are now at a stage where we have enough resources ourselves to extract a lot of information and to monitor a lot of things. I mean, so this is something that we were really needing in the beginning, and now it's a bit less. So if it's a soldier you see somewhere, uh, and okay, don't put yourself in the risk of filming them or whatever. Don't do that. We don't need that. We're fine. So I wouldn't say that. However, if you're a whistleblower in the sense that you have more interesting information than you just see a guy speaking Hebrew and then you think he's a soldier. That's not interesting for us. And sometimes you can get it wrong and just an Israeli guy there and then you get into trouble. So we don't ask the general public to do anything with that. But if you're in a position to have access to interesting information beyond that, we are receiving increasingly information from whistleblowers, and especially people who are living in historical Palestine, including Hebrew speakers. And we have a Hebrew unit that works on that as well. So we're always open. And we do not require any ideological alignment, of course, from anybody who's a volunteer. We are committed as an organization, and we all have our opinions, of course. We have all of our opinions. And I'm telling you, the people who work for HRF, they vary from people who think like I do to people who are, I don't know, maybe just liberals who want to see the law applied, but they maybe are loyal Israeli citizens. So it's very broad range of people. They do not share an ideology, but they share one idea, which is, oh, there's Israeli impunity. How come? This shouldn't stand. We will take care of this. There should be justice brought to the victims of this genocide. This is the only thing we share with each other in HRF. That's why we created it, by the way, to be like a machine, very limited, very focused. I myself, I'm an author, so when I'm talking, I'm always talking about ideologies and things and making analysis, and I'm rather on the left, so I make this kind of leftist analysis. I know some people within HRF are rather maybe on the right spectrum. They're not on the left, but it doesn't matter. We're not dogmatic that way. Our dogma is justice. Our dogma is international law. Our dogma is injustice should not be tolerated, impunity should end, and accountability should be established also for the Israelis and justice done for the Palestinian victims. We don't have an opinion as HRF about how the future of the story. I have opinions. March 30 movement has opinions, but HRF does not engage as HRF in a program for the future of Palestine. Doesn't engage in a debate even on resistance. I have opinions on resistance. When I say I think resistance is legitimate, and these are my opinions, but HRF does not even have a position on resistance. We don't talk about that. We are focused on the crimes and the criminals and the victims, the justice for the victims. So this is a bit the operation. So I'm saying this to make anyone who's listening understand that we're not a political party, we're not a political movement, we don't have an ideology, we're all about justice. So if you care about justice and you can help this struggle for justice, you can already maybe do something and reach out to the HRF.
So let's talk about that. As you said, what is it that people can do? Your foundation, as you said, seeks justice, demands accountability, is really dedicated to breaking the impunity, which is, I think, the thing that keeps Israel behaving worse and worse and worse, if it's possible, and achieving, justice for the Gaza victims. I know you are a nonprofit. You rely on small donations monthly, and we're going to put the link to the Hind Rajab Foundation into the bio. But if someone's listening to this episode right now, they want to help. I know you gave some interesting concrete examples. Are there any more things that people can do immediately to support the foundation's work other than donating, which is important?
Mm-hmm. I think, of course, donating is, like you said, and it is indeed our approach to only rely on donations of the public. So we do not have subsidies. We're not financed by states or even organizations. We're only financed by individuals, by people, and the donation go through our website. Okay, we can also pass our bank account if somebody does not want to use the payment processor we use. But beyond that, really, Sharmin, it's about talent. It's about, are you a lawyer and you feel something for this organization? Join us. are you a coder? And I'm saying that, a lot of people, coders, don't realize that they are important. Are you a coder? Can you build solutions, databases? Can you program AI models? Can you work on facial recognition modules, to make it even more concrete? Do you have experience in blockchain technology for preserving data? We're always in need of those. We're always in need of these profiles. These are the most needed profiles, and these are the most rare profiles to find, especially. For the rest, I think also it's something that I believe is we think as organization, we need to be like what you're doing with us now is like putting us on the platform and asking us these questions, right? We want people to do that more with us, and this is something maybe we haven't been doing a lot because we've been very focused on the work, but we are now more capable of doing, engaging, communicating, talking to people who do not belong to the traditional niche that supports us, that is in different biotops in different communities, people who do not necessarily know a lot about the Palestinian struggle and who are learning about it now. So I mean, it's important for people in the broad sense, also outside of the movement, to know what we're doing, to understand really why we're doing it, and to then to make up their mind whether they want to be part of this and support it in any way they can. Because I think it's a big endeavor. And like I said, first of all, we do not really believe that this is only the task of this foundation. I think we started this and I think this model, including what I'm talking about the model, because other organizations have been filing cases for a century already. But I'm talking about going after the perpetrators, going after the rank and file. This is something that we established, and I think other organizations should start doing it. Organizations should also, like start looking at this as one important avenue to seeking justice. I think this is important so that it's not only the Hind Rajab Foundation doing this. And this is one thing. The other thing is, well, you said something about media. That was the question before and the narrative. Um, you know, International media or traditional media is interested in us when there's some exciting event. It has also this drive, not just to minimize and to kind of hide the crimes or dilute them, create some doubt, which it does always. But even when they do not do that, they're looking for sensation. They're looking for, oh, this news story. Oh, this guy came to our country. Oh, he's here now. So then it's interesting for that particular country. So I think, we need to, like to present what we're doing now is like a long form of discussion where you can dive deeply into what the real situation is and what the real challenge is for this organization. I think you will never find the real story in traditional media. You will just find fragments of it. So I think creating alternative media and strengthening it is also indeed like one of the biggest challenges facing this whole solidarity movement, next to the legal challenge. I think this is, but also other forms who can tell the story, not just media, not just podcasts, not just like publications, but other forms that can, like you mentioned earlier, you know, participate in storytelling in a way that can move people beyond what I can tell, right? Because I can tell things in a dry way, maybe sometimes clear to, this is my job, this is what I'm supposed to do. But I think our story should be maybe told differently. And that can also protect the foundation and enable it to survive longer.
I think it's very important, and I agree. I think you need more exposure to more wider people because not many people know about your organization. I mean, we came across it; we're very active, and so it's really important to sort of spread that message. And I hope our podcast will do that. But before we wrap, is there? Yeah, what's the future that you're fighting for and hoping to achieve, and what does sort of justice and a long-lasting peace and solution look like to you? I know you said your organization, you said that's not something you set, but what for you, what are you fighting for the future?
Yes, I mean, this is of course, my personal opinion, my personal commitment, right? Uh, for me, the injustice in Palestine is not just a genocide. The injustice in Palestine is the Nakba, is what happened, is the settler colonial project that is genocidal on the onset already. Because what happened in the Nakba is, clearly according to the definition of genocide, a genocidal act. It is actually creating conditions aiming at the destruction of a population in whole or in part. But also it is one of the most, blatant acts of injustice in the history of humankind. Definitely in the modern history, right? I mean, okay, we can look at colonialism, we can find similar cases from the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century. Uh, if you look at the 20th century, and this is why people sometimes don't understand why is Palestine so sensitive for so many people in comparison to other atrocities across the world? Because there's a lot of injustice in this planet, right? And sometimes in quantity, it sometimes exceeds Palestine in terms of the number of deaths and everything. However, one important aspect of this is not just the settler colonial nature of the Israeli Zionist project in Palestine, which is an abomination. Settler colonialism definitely, I'm not saying in the 20th century, already from the 19th century, it was totally not anymore aligned with the zeitgeist of the time, because I'm in a way, I understand people who say, yeah, settler colonialism and the Middle Ages or whatever, okay, that was natural then. People did not see it as they saw it later. But at least after the emergence of all these Enlightenment ideas and so on, at least, at that moment, you should call it what it is, which is an abomination and a terrible crime. But beyond that, in all these other cases, in most of these other cases, I don't want to be, comprehensive on it because there might be something I'm not aware of. But in most of these cases, when you have injustice in the world that is not committed by directly by big powers, uh, if you look at Syria, if you look at Sudan, if you look at, different other examples, you will often see at least a majority, I'm not saying everyone in the world, a majority of the countries, including in the West, because we're talking about the concentration of power, the powerful, dominant, the hegemonic, West. It's losing its hegemony, but it's still dominant in the West opposing that atrocity, opposing, at least verbally. I'm not saying they're doing something about it, but they're condemning it. They're saying, oh, that is bad. You shouldn't do that. Oh, the people committing genocide in Sudan are bad. Nobody's contesting, saying, oh, this is a good thing, what's happening there. Oh, these Janjaweed are defending themselves. Or these RSA, are killing, the Darfur people. Oh, they're defending themselves. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying in the West, Bashar al-Assad is defending himself. He's defending himself. You can, on the opposition side, you have people on the left who say that, but I mean, not in the mainstream, right? The mainstream was, oh, he's a war criminal. We should arrest him. He's massacring his people. Look at Ukraine. Nobody's saying, Putin is defending himself. Again, people on the left, they say that sometimes. They make some interesting analysis. There might be a point there, but I mean, not in the mainstream, you never hear something like that. But in Palestine, you hear nothing but that. You hear but the establishment saying, oh, the occupier is defending himself, the genocidaire is defending himself lately. And before that, the ethnic cleanser is defending themselves. And that is why Palestine is universal as a cause. It is not just about the Palestinians. It is not just about people like us who are adjacent to the Palestinians who are actually almost the same people. It says something about this world and its structure and how injustice is part of how the system is built. Okay. So this is why the case of Palestine represents so many other causes for humanity. The cause for law to start with, which is justice, law against might, not law in service of power, right? It represents something for indigenous people everywhere. This is a case of a people that is being destroyed on its own land by a racist narrative that is colonial and supremacist by nature. It is actually the fights that we have lost, that humanity, when I say we, I'm talking about humanity, the fights that we have lost in for the indigenous populations in North America and South America, for indigenous populations everywhere who were enslaved and destroyed and killed, and they remained in reservations, and they became just a relic and part of history and a sad story. This fight is still, it's still on. This fight is still ongoing, and it represents them all. It is again, you remember in the beginning of genocide, there was that dance, that native dance that was very popular, that Palestinians were dancing, with the stone, like me'la, I don't know how to say it in English. And they were emulating the dance of Native Americans in it, and it kind of hit a chord, and it's logical it hits a chord. This is the native fighting for his or her existence on their ground. This is, and if you want to go a bit more academical, and it's not necessary, but I mean, this is a subaltern who's speaking, This is the person who is not supposed to have a voice, in this planet, where we are focused on a globalized 2 billion people among 8 billion people, where 6 billion people have almost no word to add to the narrative of this humanity, have no seat on the table, have nothing to say. Well, the Palestinian is that person speaking back. So this cause is, for me, a lot more than just a geopolitical accident or a cultural commitment to my next of kin, or my people, as an Arab or as a Muslim or whatever. No, it represents much more, and I think this is why Palestine struck a chord, and this is why this genocide also means a lot, and made a lot of people think and rethink, and it went even beyond ideology. It actually transcended the left-right cleavage, and it went beyond that. It's now, you see people on the right, who are talking like people on the left, and you see people on the right and on the left also supporting Israel. It went into a level that actually abstracts ideology a little bit, and it goes to the essence of what makes us human as people, the essence of humanity. And this is why this cause is important. And this is why also, so I'm talking about it from the side of the Palestinian, and the suffering of the Palestinian, and the plight of the Palestinian, and the struggle of the Palestinian. But if you look at it also from the side of the privilege of Israel, of the impunity of Israel, the lack of accountability, it also tells a tale about this world, and about the structure of power in this world, and how it is, and why it should change, and why it cannot stand like that. And everybody articulates that within their own reality. People on the left maybe understand it, in my opinion. I don't know where you stand on the political line, but I'm more on that left side, and I see that as an expression of injustice, and an expression of hegemony, of certain corrupted elites in this world, and that it should be overthrown to create a justice for all, right? But some people on the right also articulate it differently. Like, so I have people in America who say, oh, like, this is like enslaving my country. We should be America first, right? I mean, it's their way of saying basically the same thing, but they agree or disagree, but they're saying there's something wrong with this. So yeah, it's a long story maybe, but this is what it means to me, and that's why I believe, okay, this struggle here will shape our world for the coming century, maybe. It is a defining moment. It's a turning point beyond just Palestine, what happened there. Palestine will shape on how we deal with it, and you know, how do we react to this genocide, and will shape what we will be as a species for the coming period. I think it will shape us as humanity.
Yeah. I don't think that is any exaggeration whatsoever, which is why I think we and so many people are finding the work around Palestine so important. But yes, I think it's fascinating. We could be doing, I think, many more questions, and maybe we need to do another whole session with you, Dyab. But really, it's been so impressive to hear about some of the work that the Hind Rajab Foundation is doing. And as I say to our listeners, we will be posting the links for more information and for donations in the bio. Dyab, you said, after witnessing this genocide, there is no turning back. And indeed, history will judge each of us by how we respond and the actions that we take today to stop this ongoing erasure and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, the using of food, the deprivation of aid as a weapon, and the intentional Israeli man-made starvation and this barbaric live-streamed Gaza genocide, which is still continuing today. It's our collective responsibility to speak out and act against this injustice. And if you have enjoyed today's episode, please just take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement definitely helps us to amplify voices grounded in humanism, truth, and justice.
And as I wrap, stories and representation matter. Stay informed, stay engaged, speak up, and most importantly, take action for justice for Palestine. Our collective voice is making a change, and in solidarity with appreciation, see you next time. And Dyab, shukran for joining us today, and thank you for all that you do and the incredible work you do for Palestine.
Dyab, thank you so much for being with us today, being such an
Thank you for having me.